Welcome to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where we help farmers, ranchers, and business owners create a seamless transition plan for the future. From retirement to ownership transfer, we protect what you've built and guide you every step of the way.
Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with attorney Valeska Hermanson from Hermanson Law. In our first session, we covered the big picture questions around Medicaid planning, what it is, who it helps, and why it's so important for families caring for aged loved ones. Today, we're getting even more practical. We'll dig into real-life examples, timing, and eligibility traps, and how proactive planning can make all the difference when it comes to protecting your assets and easing the burden on family caregivers. So if you've ever wondered when to start, what counts as a gift, or how to make sure your loved one's care doesn't unravel your legacy, this session is for you. All right. Welcome back, Valeska.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. So last time we talked about the important documents that we need to have. So we've got those in our toolbox. And now you've got that client that is sitting in front of you and asking for help to be able to apply for their Medicaid coverage or figuring out what planning they need to do. So let's take the scenario that if they have time to plan, well, how does that look? How does that structure evolve?
So if I have clients in front of me, you know, as we were talking about before, trying to figure out now we've gathered what all they have. You know, not gathered it, but we figured out what all they have. And now the next step is, what do they want to do with it? You know, and also, what is their health needs? What are they looking at in the future? And so we're talking about their healthcare. Is one or both of them, is it likely that they're going to end up needing some sort of nursing care, whether it be in the nursing home or at home? You know, is somebody possibly going to have Alzheimer's? Is somebody going to end up with cancer or something where they're going to need healthcare, going to need nursing care, skilled nursing care? If they're healthy right now, and it doesn't look like anything's going to happen in the next 5 years that would end up with either of them being in the nursing home, then we can do some planning. If they're ready, then we can do some planning that will protect the assets that they want to protect. So say, for example, they have a farm and they want to make sure that the farm goes to a child who is farming it. Or they have a farm that they're getting income from, but they want to make sure that the farm gets sold to the farmer that's farming it. But they also want to make sure it gets sold to him for less than full value. Because as we know, at least in your area, and I know in this area as well, sometimes it's too expensive for a new, younger farmer to pay full price for. So if it's an older couple that wants to support a younger farmer, maybe they want to sell it for less than full value, or, you know, so they would be doing some gifting. So one of the things with Medicaid is if you do any gifting 5 years prior to making the Medicaid application, you are disqualified for Medicaid for the period of time that the gift would cover your care. So if your gift is $200,000 and your care costs $10,000 a month, you are ineligible for 20 months. And your period of ineligibility doesn't start until you otherwise qualify. So you have no money now, and you don't have any money to pay for 20 months. And usually, the nursing home will ask you to make that Medicaid application at the time you enter the home, so the nursing home knows whether or not you're going to qualify, because the nursing home wants to get paid by somebody.
Right.
So if you don't qualify and the nursing home doesn't have somebody who's willing to sign on the dotted line and say, yes, I'm going to pay this bill, you're going to have a really hard time getting into the nursing home. Where now you need care, you're going to have trouble getting into someone for your care. So we want to make sure that whatever gifts are done outside of that 5-year look back period. So say we take that example that they want to make a $20,000 or $200,000 gift to this farmer and have the farmer buy the remainder portion of it so that they can use that $200,000 as part of their equity for the bank to structure the rest of the payments. They can do that. They have the right to do that. But we want to make sure that they do that while they're still healthy so that they can get past that 5-year look back period. So it would be a matter of, do they want to sell it on contract for deed? If they sold it on contract for deed, that's something that Medicaid doesn't really like. They don't like contract for deeds because they want people to have the money available to just be able to pay their care. In those contracts, you only get X amount of money a month, or you get X amount of money in, say, March and October, November, based on when the farmer gets his money. They don't particularly care for him. They might try to force the person to sell out the contract for deed. So it's better to see if you can get a bank to write a loan, loan them the money for it. But then we can explore the options for the people who have that kind of time. We can try to find a way to make that work. Well, and one of the things I should say in the front end is that there is no way for somebody to protect the thing they want to protect, but still have their hands in it. They can't maintain any control over it. They can't maintain any benefit from it. So if they want the farm to stay in the family, they want to put it in a trust and they want to be the beneficiary of it, Medicaid may very well say, because you're the beneficiary, that entire farm is now considered an asset for Medicaid or for nursing home purposes. You have to sell it and use all of the value of it to pay for your own care before you will ever qualify for Medicaid. So you need to get your hands out of it completely. If somebody wants to have the farm, wants the family to have the farm, they can deed the farm to the children and have the children put it in a trust. And if mom and dad are still in enough health that they can still farm it and are still farming it, mom and dad could lease it from the kids. They could continue to farm it and get the benefit from farming it through the lease, but they can't be the beneficiaries of it. It all has to be through that lease structure. And then when they can no longer farm it, and maybe one of them now has to go into the nursing home, that lease can terminate. Now they have no longer any rights in that farm. The trust owns it. The kids are the beneficiaries of it. The parents don't have their hands in it anymore. And so the parents could potentially qualify for the Medicaid benefits, as long as you're past that 5-year look back where they gave the farm to the kids.
And the kids put it into a trust. And then mom and dad had a lease through that from the trust. Yep.
And the reason that I generally would suggest the kids put it into a trust is because that protects the kids' interests then from potentially from divorce, from judgments, from other things that the kids may run into themselves, as opposed to owning it outright.
Yep. Any of those outside influences because oftentimes you've got spouses that could be chirping over here in the background saying, well, we think you should do this. But then you've got this family legacy that they're wanting to make sure that they keep control of and keep in the family. And next thing you know, and that's not a farming sibling. And then they're wanting to make changes and sell things off. So as long as the kids all are on the same page when mom and dad deed it to them, it's basically that gift that goes directly to them. And then they're filing a gift tax return when they're doing that. So they're having to gift that entire farm, have the gift recorded. You need to have a gift tax return done.
And then the gift tax return, yep, absolutely. Prepared. So you want to do the appraisal so that you can, you have the correct value for the gift tax return. Now, there are issues with that we would discuss, and when people are talking about that kind of stuff, we loop in accountants and things, because if you're gifting stuff to kids during your lifetime, they're not going to get a step-up basis for capital gains purposes. So if they turn around and sell it, they're going to be paying capital gains between what mom and dad bought it at and what the kids sell it at. So there's some of those issues that become a problem. I believe North Dakota Medicaid still says that a life estate interest is a excluded asset for Medicaid purposes. So if you put the land if you deed the land to the kids and reserve a life estate in the land, as long as Medicaid continues to say that the life estate is an excluded asset, and you get past that 5-year look back for that gift, then mom and dad can possibly qualify for Medicaid, like assuming the laws don't change.
Right.
And then at the end of the life, then the farm is the kids, and you could potentially get that step up basis. Caution on that would be in Minnesota, for example, life estate is excluded for the purposes of application and qualifying for Medicaid. But at the end of the surviving spouse's life, if wife and husband have a life estate and wife goes on Medicaid in a nursing home or wherever, wife dies first, then husband dies, Medicaid is going to make a claim against that life estate interest for the value of the life estate interest at the moment of husband's death, I believe. And there's a calculation there. So the husband actually, the moment before he died, had a percentage value in the farm based on his life expectancy. And Medicaid will claim back their money to the maximum either of husband's life estate or whatever Medicaid paid. So there will be money that comes out of that farm that has to be paid by either the kids or sale of a portion of that farm to pay back Medicaid. Federal law allows that. North Dakota could do that at any time. As far as I know, North Dakota hasn't done that, but Minnesota does. So it wouldn't surprise me if North Dakota decides they want to do that at some point. So there's some cautions with life estate that the trust gives a little more security. But if the capital gains is a bigger issue, then you have those balancing factors. And that's why sometimes the accountants are always helpful. I am not an accountant. I started accounting in college.
That's a whole nother animal. That's a whole nother animal.
Yes.
But I always tell people that it is so important to make sure that you have your whole entire team in your toolbox, because you've got your attorney, you've got your estate planner or succession planner, things that they think of that the attorney doesn't. You've got the accountant and things that they think of that somebody else doesn't think of, making sure that you've got the best possibly laid out plan. And I might have talked about this on a past episode, but I talked to an individual not too long ago that they were wanting to sell their land and they didn't want to get an appraisal. And they didn't want to have to go through that process and pay for an appraisal. And it's like, well, my neighbor didn't have to do that when they sold their land to their son, but I can't speak for what the neighbor is doing or who their advisors are, who is in their toolbox. But it is so important to make sure that you bring all your people together and understand what are your tax implications and what really you're trying to accomplish. And is it the capital gains that we want to protect against, or is it gifting? And really what, where our values are at with the total market value of all of your assets. And then two, it's going to change. This year, it's going to be completely different than what it's going to be in 5 years down the road if they do change any of the gift tax laws or the Medicaid laws
changing all the time. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That, as far as getting an appraisal, anytime you do gifting, you want to make sure that you can provide the IRS with a true value of the thing that you gifted. And that's where the appraisal is necessary at that point. If you are selling something, especially to a family member of any type, whether it's your niece or your cousin or your child or your brother or whatever, for Medicaid purposes, you have to have an appraisal if you're selling it, because if you sell it for under its value, based on the appraisal or based on what Medicaid decides to say that it was worth because you didn't have an appraisal, now you've made a gift and you're disqualified for Medicaid.
Right.
So you have to have that appraisal so you know what you're doing. And you can decide to gift it once you have that appraisal. If you decide, yeah, I still want to gift it, just you need to know what your consequences are.
Right.
So you need to have that information. Now, if you're selling it to a total third party and you're selling it through a realtor or something, then I wouldn't, and a bank's going to be involved. And so you're going to end up, the bank's going to get an appraisal. Then I wouldn't worry about it as much because they're arm's length negotiation where it's somebody that you don't have any reason to give any particular discount to or anything. You're just both dealing at arm's length. So that's not as important to get an appraisal, but there's a lot of situations where it is. And even for David and I, we have some property in Minnesota, and it's just 76 acres of woodland. And David probably he gets texts all the time. And then we get letters, 2-3 letters a week that say, hey, we want to buy your land in Minnesota and here's what we're offering. And, they have these little letters will be like written offers and it's half the price or whatever. And we don't want to sell this property. It's a gorgeous property adjacent to my parents' property. And it's, we sometimes talk about possibly building there, either to live there in retirement or something. But when there was some reason that I wanted to have like a decent value, I know why. Because the taxes have doubled. The value have doubled in the past 5 years. And so one of the gals, it's my hometown, one of the gals that I graduated with in high school does appraisals. And I sent her a message and I said, hey, there's this property right here. Would you mind giving me, we're thinking about getting an appraisal. And so she sent me a couple of, I can't think of the word. What's the word where they look at other properties?
A couple of comps. She sent you some comps.
She sent me a couple of comps and say, well, actually, it looks like they're right. The county's right about what this value would probably be. So even if you went to an appraiser and said, hey, just give me your best guess, at least you have something to go on.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to set a price. And if you're working through a realtor, they're going to look up comps and say, here's what I think you should set it at or something.
Right. So you've got that basis. So not only just, I talked about this in one of my past podcasts with attorney Brittany Faust. We talked about contract for deeds and so forth and how important it was to have that for IRS purposes. And now you're seeing it on the Medicaid side. To even apply for things, you need to make sure that you have a full valuation of what your property is, because how does that application look? You're having to put down all of your assets and what the value is of everything. So if you don't have your correct documents, it could very well disqualify you from even applying for those benefits. So having that 5-year look back. So if you are going to do a gift, whether it's to the current farm tenant that is renting the land, or if it's going to children or whatever, if you did that gift, you file a gift tax return, it's been past 5 years, you start the clock ticking, the 5 years is expired. Have you ever seen them go back claw back, I should say, past?
That's the 5 year. They'll argue that the contract for deed gives them a reason to go further back.
Mm-hmm.
That's another caution on that contract for deed. And that's why sometimes the outright sale is better, but generally not. Now they could say, for years and years, we've heard now that it's going to go to 7 years. It's going to go to 10 years or whatever. That could happen at any time. And then the planning that we've done for 5 years, look back.
I know.
It's going to be 7 years. We don't have any control over that. We can't plan for that. We can just warn people that could be the case. But as we know right now, it's that 5-year look back. But so that's where if I'm talking to clients that have time, I just say, here's what you can do. If you want to do any gifting, the sooner the better. Get that time clock started. And if you want to try to start gifting, but you want to do it kind of slowly, just know that every time you give a gift, you're starting that time clock kind of again. Any money that you give or any asset, it doesn't have to be money. any asset. If you give away the car, that's a gift. If you give away your bicycle, that's a gift. Now, if you give away things you give away some of your household stuff, you have the family come and take the things in your house that they need or want, or you have grandkids that are going to college and they need a couch and they come and get this and that and the other. Medicaid isn't going to nickel and dime that stuff for the most part.
Okay.
So don't advertise
Right.
that kind of thing.
So they're not,
don't
right?
tell anybody.
We won't tell anybody. That one's under the rug. That one's under the rug. You could literally give the rug away, but just don't tell them.
Just don't tell anybody. Yeah. Just
because it's
under the floorboards.
Right.
But the things, especially things that are titled, the boat, the trailer, the four-wheeler, things of value, your art collection, the Picasso, the whatever you stole from the Louvre.
Right.
That kind of stuff. Don't. So that's all gifts. They're going to count against that. Whatever the value of that is going to cause a period of disqualification for however long that value would have paid for your care in the nursing home.
Yep.
So you have that. And we can, if you have the time, we can work with it. We can structure trusts. We can do the gifting. We can structure gifting so it's under the 19,000, still 19. Yeah, 19,000 per year. Sometimes people have 7 family members and they're all married and they have grandkids. And all of a sudden, this person, gave away $200,000 because they have
it adds up.
Just one fell swoop. Or, there's a lot of that stuff that can happen too, depending on your situation. So there's a lot that can be done if people have time. If you don't have time, then we look at what are the opportunities, what else is going on in people's life that give you an opportunity to spend down your money so that you are at a level of eligibility. So eligibility for Medicaid, I don't have the exact figures. I forgot to look up the exact figures, which I need to do before Thursday. But the last time I looked them up, I believe so North Dakota and Minnesota are a little bit different than that. Minnesota has an exact figure. You have to be under X amount of dollars if you're married. And then you can have the house and the car and some other excluded assets. North Dakota has that split. They take a snapshot. And they say, so if you start, let's say it's $140,000. If when they take the snapshot, you have $280,000, you have to spend down to $140. If you have $200,000, you have to spend down to $100. You have to spend down half of what you have, but they have a minimum. So let's say that the minimum is $60,000. If you have $65,000, you only have to spend down $5,000 to reach that $60,000. So that's for a married couple. And again, there are some excluded assets: the house, the vehicle, the funeral, especially if you have a funeral policy, prepaid funeral kind of thing. And there's a maximum value on that.
I was going to add, do you remember, Valeska, what it is for funeral expenses? Because when I was at the bank, we could do like burial CDs for clients. They could have X amount. And I haven't looked it up lately.
5,000 or 6,000, but I'm not positive. Okay. It's way lower than a funeral would actually cost.
Okay. So much easier to plan ahead of time if you do go and do the pre-funeral planning. So then you take that off of your worry list.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also valid spend down. If you need to spend down, then setting that up, if you haven't already, is valid spend down. Mm-hmm. Valid spend down. So if you need to spend down some money to get to the eligibility level, you can, and you own a home. So the home is excluded. You can put a new roof on if you need a new roof. You can put new windows on. You can have new, like if you're worried that insulation isn't good, have some new insulation blown in, put new tires on the vehicle or get a new vehicle. Don't get an Escalade, right? Maybe, but get a new good vehicle if you need one. So those are all valid spend down because you're spending it on an excluded asset. So there's some things that can go like there too. If you have a disabled child or a blind child, you can give assets to the disabled child or a blind child, and that is valid spin down. You will not be disqualified for gifts to a disabled child or a blind child.
Does it matter if you were guardian for them? Is there, I mean, let's say you're 80 some years old, you're having to go into the nursing home, but that child that has the special needs is, 50 years old.
No, it doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter.
Right. Doesn't matter. And at least in Minnesota, but I think in both states, you can set up a special needs trust for anyone. So if you have a niece, nephew, if you have a friend, anyone under the age of 65 that is under the Social Security rules, Medicaid rules, qualified as disabled, and you would want to actually know that they, not just that, oh, I'm pretty sure they're disabled. You want them to actually have gone through the process to be qualified as disabled. You can set up a supplemental needs or special needs trust for that individual and put assets in it, and that is valid spin down.
Okay.
And it is not considered a disqualifying gift for Medicaid. In Minnesota, even if you are over the age of 65, if you are going into a nursing home, you can make a self-settled special needs trust for yourself, put all of your assets in it. Well, I shouldn't say all of your assets. I need to review the case again, but you can put assets in there in order to qualify for Medicaid.
Okay.
Once you're qualified, then at your death, Medicaid will make a claim against the trust for payback of everything that they've spent. And if there's any money left over, then that money, I believe, can go to whoever you've designated to inherit that money.
Okay.
So North Dakota, to my knowledge, there has not been a case in North Dakota on that yet. I know the attorney who brought the Minnesota case. She works at Northwoods Legal. She's an attorney in northern Minnesota. And I think her firm is called Northwoods. She brought the case to the Supreme Court of Minnesota, won. So that is a right in Minnesota now. I don't believe there's been a North Dakota test case for that yet.
Okay.
That's a big deal because now that individual is able to buy themselves a new bed, use that asset for their care to the extent that Medicaid doesn't pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than just getting rid of it all and being destitute,
right,
they can actually have that.
Then you have this money over here. When I had a couple of cases that I worked with or trusts that they did have the special needs trust. So you're using those funds over here. And then at the time when the individual did pass, then the state came back. It took a couple of months, but then this was the state of North Dakota. Then they came back and said, okay, now this is the gap. This is how much that you owe. What do you have left? And I had to provide documentation and so forth of what the balances of that trust. And then they did require to take, which the ward or the individual, the patient client, he did spend way more the state benefits than what they even had in their trust. But at least they were able to provide certain things for me, give them that quality of life during their lifetime. So that way they could, any of those things that insurance didn't pay for, they were still able to have for their quality of life. And that's a huge thing because
it does depend on depending on who sets it up. I think a lot of times if it's a self-settled special needs trust, then if Medicaid pays things, then they get the right to take back your claim reimbursement on that. If it's a third party setup special needs trust, a lot of times, like if it's a grandparent that sets it up for a child that's disabled, then the grandparent can actually say, when this this grandchild dies, then whatever's left in there gets split between their siblings or whatever. And Medicaid doesn't have any right to touch anything else because the grandparents weren't legally obligated to take care of that child. We're legally obligated to take care of ourselves. So if we set it up ourselves, then we have to pay Medicaid back. But grandparent isn't legally obligated to take care of a child. Parent is not legally obligated to take care of an adult child. There's some times that the person setting it up can actually say at the end of the beneficiary's life, all this money then goes somewhere else and Medicaid can't take it. Depends on how it's set up. Yeah.
Right. So definitely those planning questions that when you're working with clients and figuring out who they have in their family tree that might need some additional benefits, whether it's for themselves or how they want to structure that, or if there's from family or friends, if there's some sort of special needs that they want to do. And you work with them to make sure things get structured so you're not shooting yourself in the foot and you've got the funds available to take care of, or you're just spending frivolously. Because if you're having to spend down, does Medicaid look at before your application process, or do you spend down when you first start with the application?
There's a period where you should apply in North Dakota that is when you have double the assets that is the highest that you could keep.
Okay.
Because then they'll say you have to spend down X. That allows you to keep the maximum amount of money, or even higher than that. If you plan on doing some special needs trusts and stuff like that, then you want to potentially even apply when you have more. And then they want to see where all this stuff went. So they're going to want documentation of all of that. Oh, there's some other stuff too. If you own a home jointly with a sibling, you can transfer it to a sibling, and that's not a disqualifying transfer.
Okay.
So that's an odd thing that just happens to be there. If a child moved in to care for a parent and has cared for that parent for 2 years, and you get doctor documentation that kept the parent out of a nursing home for 2 years, you can transfer that home to the child.
Oh, that's
so
very...
Yeah. But I believe that only works with child and parent. And owning a home jointly with a sibling, that only works with siblings. It doesn't work with child and parent. It only works with siblings.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then some red flags. Or did you have a question?
No, I was just thinking, so many times when people are doing their planning and so forth, it's like, okay, how can we, and maybe you're going to talk about this with the red flags, but they always think, and there's no one size fits all. So they always think, well, what do I need to do? Because I don't want to have to pay for my nursing home care. I want to be able to preserve the farm, using that mostly for the farm or whatever small business we have. That's my target audience. And maybe you'll get into that with the red flag portion of it, because so many times they're wanting to avoid doing this and doing all this extra things, but there's really no way to get around not having to pay.
The only thing I can say is start early. You have to start 5 years beforehand. And you can't know when you're going to end up in a nursing home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to start early, because by the time you're going to be in a nursing home, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they went with the 5-year look back. If you make any transfers within 5 years of going into the nursing home, Medicaid assumes that transfer was made for the purpose of qualifying for Medicaid. There's a presumption there. And the Minnesota seminar Minnesota has like a 6 or 8 hour seminar that I've been watching, and it's fantastic. And they said, it's basically a presumption you can't overcome. They are going to presume that you did it for the purpose of qualifying for benefits. That's it.
Right.
You can't really overcome it.
So really at the end, you need to take the proper steps to make sure that you're setting your assets up for success, if you will, to make sure that you're protecting yourself, protecting your family, protecting what you worked so hard to build, and not just all of a sudden, well, you just start gifting things away. And within 2 or 3 years, you go into the needing assisted care or some sort of skilled nursing care. And now you're on your own because you're not going to qualify for your benefit, and you're going to have to start liquidating assets then.
Yeah. And that's if you sell things for their full value, there's no period of disqualification. Let's say worst case scenario, mom has to go into the home. Dad's already deceased. Mom needs to go into the home. The farm is in her name. So what are you going to do? Well, maybe maybe the kids get together and if they can come up with enough money to pay the nursing home bill somehow, or get a loan for monthly so that they could take out a line of credit or something like an operating loan and it's a mortgage against the land or something like that. If they have, and it's horrible to think about these things, but these are the things that I have to think about, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say that she's got terminal cancer and the doctor has said, well, realistically, you're not even going to live 2 years. Well, okay, if the kids go talk to a bank and the bank says, okay, we'll do an operating loan on the farm for, and give you the monthly money to pay for your mom's care for the period of time that she lives, then you'll inherit it. And then, we can work out how it's going to get paid. Maybe you sell off this quarter over here. Mm-hmm. And we get paid in full, or maybe, so they can potentially plan around that rather than try to sell off the home right then and there, or transfer the farm or sell it to somebody and they don't really want to sell it. Or maybe there's a quarter that nobody really wants. And so they sell that quarter for its full value. But, there again, do you have capital gains tax? So if the kids inherit it, then they get that step up basis. They can sell that quarter. They don't pay any capital gains on it. They pay the bank back, so maybe they take a reverse mortgage on that quarter that nobody really wants. Oh. There's sometimes you have to be creative, but if you know all the facts, sometimes you can work around things. Sometimes being on Medicaid shouldn't be the goal. Sometimes you can have a better result by not taking the steps to get on Medicaid, depending on where you start out. And also, if the clients come to me and their goal is, we don't want to ever sell the farm, we want to make it so our kids inherit everything. We want everything to go to the kids. So we don't have to pay anything so that we get on benefits. And if I say to them, okay, the only way to do that, you're 65, you're still farming. Do you want to give up all control over the farm right now? Do you want to give up all of your money in your bank accounts right now? Your Edward Jones account, your agency accounts, all these things. Are you ready to give all of that to your kids? Not be able to go on vacations without asking your kids permission for some money?
No.
Are you ready to take that step? No. They're not ready. And I completely understand and support that. I also understand that they don't want everything that they've worked for so hard to be used for nursing home care. But there are potentially other options, and sometimes it's not the worst thing in the world. Too. Right. So, and then veterans benefits. Oh, a lot of times veterans do not sign up for veterans benefits. My dad was one of those. He was stationed in Japan at the end of the Korean War. So he was over there in 1953. He worked on planes. He fixed planes and stuff. And he didn't fly. He wasn't a pilot, but they would fly during the day and then they'd come in and he and his crew would fix the planes at night and then they'd go fly around again and stuff. So, but because he was overseas during wartime, during years of wartime, he would have qualified for an immense amount of veterans benefits. he did not sign up for any veterans benefits during his lifetime until he got to the point where he needed nursing home care. And I knew by that time that he may qualify for nursing home benefits because of his active duty during wartime. And he did. And in fact, well, they had to go in and bring his documents in and actually get him a number for his VA benefits and all that. And he was 83, I think, when he was actually doing it. He never did it.
Never did it.
He got all that information, and they looked at a couple places, and the Fergus Falls VA home looks really nice, and they looked at that, and so they actually signed him up to go there. And so not only he was eligible for nursing home through the VA, but mom is as well. And I think that there's an awful lot of veterans who don't use VA benefits. They don't get their medical taken care of there. They don't, they go to a regular doctor. They pay through their, health insurance, through their employer or whatever. They just don't, because I think there's a sense of pride there that they serve their government. They don't want anything back from that unless that's there for people who had service-related injuries or other things like that. That's who should be getting those services. And my dad wasn't somebody who got service-related injuries. But when it comes time where we're looking at, okay, how do you structure your estate now that you need assistance? You may need to go into a nursing home. You may need to, you want to preserve as much for your family as you can. You want your spouse to get as good a home life, a community life as they can while you are being assisted and you need nursing care. VA benefits a lot of people might qualify for VA benefits, nursing home benefits, VA medical care and stuff like that haven't even considered it at this time. So I think that's a lot and I've more and more asked people about that. And there's been some people like, oh, yeah, we should look into that. Yeah, let's look into that first before you even worry about this, because the qualification is that the asset levels are different. The asset levels are not as extreme as Medicaid. Okay. So the community spouse can keep more. And then, like I said, the spouse can qualify too. So there's a lot more flexibility there.
Well, it's good information to have, because we don't always think of those types of things. And if we have veterans in the family and so forth, because you're right, they do have a sense of pride, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I can pay for my way. I don't need to continue to have more assistance. But when it comes down to it, that's why those benefits are there for them too. And it's a really good tool to make sure that they look into to have.
Right.
When you talk about the quality of life for a spouse, you're seeing where there are spouses that, even if, like in your mom's scenario, where your dad has passed, and if your mom does need to have skilled nursing care, can she go now into a VA-sponsored center? Or since your dad is deceased?
If I tried to take her right now.
Well, yeah, you're probably not, because she's in good health. Yeah, she's gonna fight. She's gonna fight you on that.
We would definitely fight me on that. But yes, if it comes to a time when mom would need nursing, skilled nursing, then she would go to a nursing home. She would go to the one in what did I say before?
Fergus. Was it Fergus Falls?
Yeah, the Fergus Falls one. Yes. She is willing to do that when that time comes.
When the time comes.
She's a snowbird in Texas right now. So
okay, well, good for her. She's getting to see some different country and to get out of the Midwest.
Yeah, she's been fishing down there already, and she's
good for her.
She has a little canoe type thing, and it's called a canyak. It's smaller than a canoe, but she takes it out and goes fishing and walks the piers, and she just walks all day long, and she has a good time down there.
Yeah.
She's in good shape, and
she's enjoying her retirement and having that quality of life for herself. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Very good.
Yep.
Very good.
So I also wanted to say in-home care is also a possibility. And I know at least in Minnesota, and I'm 99% sure in North Dakota, Medicaid will pay for skilled nursing to come to the home or to come to like assisted living and stuff, provided that it's less expensive than paying for nursing home care.
Okay.
So you can, if the person wants to stay at home and if that's a possibility, Medicaid could potentially do that where you're having somebody come into the home and help. But like for assisted living, if Medicaid pays for nursing care to come in and you live in assisted living, they're not going to pay the rent. They're not going to pay assisted living rent. Whereas if you're in a nursing home, they will pay, it's like a package deal in a nursing home.
Right.
But in assisted living, it's not a package deal. They pay for the nursing care, but not for the rent portion of it.
Okay.
So if you needed help with the rent portion of it, then, there's other organizations that you can work with to potentially get help for the rent. But those are other options. Or if somebody isn't at the point where they need skilled nursing, but the spouse isn't capable or they have enough money to get somebody in to help with it, I highly encourage that. If you have the kind of money that you can get somebody to come in to your home and assist with caring for a spouse or even a child that needs assistance, use that. Use your money. If you have the money that you can use for that, use it for that, because you are preserving the health and the life of both spouses.
Yep.
When one spouse is responsible for another spouse's care, the spouse that's giving the care, it is very hard on them. It's very hard on them emotionally. It's very hard on them physically. It can cause them to decline faster than they would otherwise. And I know that because they're married, they feel so responsible for caring for their their loved one. But it's not, I don't think in any situation, it's the best thing.
Right.
If you have the ability to get somebody in there once a week or more, do that.
And we're seeing more of that. I mean, here in our part of the state, I know of other friends and so forth and neighbors that have done that, where they've had special caregivers, skilled caregivers come into the home. So that way that individual can continue to live in their home, their surroundings where they're familiar with, and family can come and go as they please a lot easier than going into a nursing home facility for visitations with grandchildren, et cetera. And it's just a better quality of life. So yeah, if you can afford that, by all means, that's an absolute way to go. And it's not putting that stress on that spouse, thinking, as you mentioned earlier, thinking that, you have to take care of them, because yes, that's part of what you do as a spouse, but you also have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and not depleting your health either. Valeska, you talked earlier, and I don't know, we might have got sidetracked there just a little bit. We're going to get close on time here, but how about those red flags that you see in planning?
Oh, yeah. So one of the big red flags I think I run into a lot is that a child is helping and the parent wants to pay them for their help. The red flag there isn't the parent wanting to pay the child or the parent paying the child. The red flag is the parent paying the child without there being a contract. There should not be any payments from a parent to anyone else for doing the laundry, mowing the grass, any of that stuff without there being a contract first, or it's going to be considered a gift. So I know that the children come and help. Children come and help. Grandchildren come and help. There's brothers, sisters, there's all sorts of family and neighbors or whatever that want to help out. But if the person in need or the spouse of the person in need want to pay those individuals for helping, you have to have a contract first. Okay. You must have a contract in writing, signed by both individuals. So when Medicaid says, well, this looks like a gift of $100 to this person every week, you can hear, here's the contract.
Yep.
Susie
They were
was
helping with,
mowing the lawn
Yep.
every week, or, he brought his tractor over and he did our driveway every time it snowed. And that's why we paid him for this. Or
Okay.
he came in, or they brought us meals twice a week or whatever. So they just can't be doing those little, it seems inconsequential, and it's nice and everybody wants to help and it just seems like the right thing to do, but it's going to catch people up unless there's something in writing.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem like you should have to put that stuff in writing, because we're all just neighbors, right? We don't need to write that stuff down.
We're helping our family. We're helping them, and we don't think anything of it, because that's just what you do, is you're helping them. But this is great advice to have, to make sure that you've got that contract, even if it is mowing the yard or helping with general maintenance around the house.
Yeah. Okay. Even with the child moving in to care for the parent for those 2 years, I've always done a contract with that, where it sets out what the child will do and why, to make it show that there are things there that the child is doing that's keeping the person out of the nursing home. There's been other situations where the child doesn't move in, but they come over daily. They do, they do the cleaning, they do the laundry, they help with a meal or two, or they do the shopping. They run, every time there's an appointment, they bring mom to the appointment. And mom wants to, and then not only does mom want to pay them for that, it's a valid spend down.
Right.
It shows that money is going somewhere. So in that 5-year period where they're saying, well, have you given any gifts in the 5 years prior? When they look through the checkbook and everything, and I've had Department of Human Services in North Dakota go through a checkbook and a bank account and everything with a fine-tooth comb and look through everything. Where did this go? Where did that go? For 5 years. They took out cash. Where did this cash go? And all that. And it was a situation where a person had been moved from a nursing home in Texas after Hurricane Katrina.
Oh.
Up to North Dakota. In Texas, there was an annuity that qualified under Texas Medicaid that didn't qualify under North Dakota Medicaid, even though Medicaid is a federally regulated, right? Every state has its own little thing. So it didn't qualify under North Dakota Medicaid. And the child who was in charge of things and brought the parent up and got the parent settled and did everything, put the tickets on their own credit card. That was considered a gift. All these things that they did to provide for the safety of their parent during Hurricane Katrina in that horrible situation. Medicaid went through everything with a fine-tooth comb, denied this person Medicaid for a period of time because of everything that had,
all those expenses that they incurred, but their child had helped them with it. Yeah.
Yep. The child wasn't able to reimburse themselves for anything, even coming up and getting them settled and all that kind of stuff. No, that was a gift. It was awful. So
and it could have been avoided. Something that could have been avoided.
Well, I don't even know if it could have been avoided. I was like, my chin was on the ground. I couldn't believe that in that particular situation, North Dakota Medicaid was treating these individuals like that. This person, couldn't be in the nursing home that they were in because of the hurricane. They had to be moved. This is where they came, and there was relationship with North Dakota prior to them being in Texas. So there was a reason for them to be here.
Were they ever able to get care? Were you able to get it ironed out?
They had to cash in the annuity, spend down the annuity for the care. The child that was caring couldn't get any of their expenses paid back at all. Luckily, they weren't in a bad situation. I mean, they themselves weren't like destitute.
Okay.
So it didn't put them in a horrible situation, other than the fact that, Hurricane Katrina. But I've dealt with North Dakota Medicaid on some other stuff that I was, again, My chin was on the ground. Couldn't believe the kind of pickiness that and that's why cautioning the listeners, just do your due diligence. Have those contracts in place ahead of time. Keep the money completely separate. Keep the receipts.
Document.
Yeah.
Are there other red flags that you see, Valeska, that would be important for our listeners to know about, or things to keep an eye out for?
The only other one I can think of is if the individual going into the nursing home has a spouse, and for whatever reason, divorce would be beneficial for whatever reason, whether it's because it's safest for that individual, or if it's a money situation for the individual, or whatever it is, you cannot do the divorce by stipulation. If it's a divorce by stipulation, and if the non-institutionalized spouse ends up with more than the institutionalized spouse, it will be considered a gift. And generally the child, who would be the conservator who worked all that out, Medicaid said in a particular case that the institutionalized spouse had a legal right to sue the conservator, so had potential money that they could get from the lawsuit, and therefore was not eligible for Medicaid.
Wow.
Because of this lawsuit that they magically decided was a valid lawsuit. There wasn't a lawsuit there. And the nursing home wasn't getting paid. There was no money. There was no money to pay the nursing home. Nobody had any money.
Right. It wasn't that they just spend down and they gifted it all away. There just wasn't anything.
No, there wasn't anything. They didn't have anything. And there were minor children involved. It was a horrible situation. But the nursing home allowed the conservator to assign the nursing home the right to sue the conservator in exchange for the debt. And that wiped the debt so that she could get on Medicaid.
Wow.
It was, again, North Dakota Medicaid.
Very interesting. It's so hard and disheartening at the same time that you wouldn't expect to have to deal with some of those types of scenarios. But in order to make sure your loved ones are taken care of, how awful to have to go through something like that.
Yeah.
But that's what good planning, how important it is, and good planning will do to make sure that you've got your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Yeah. Make sure you've taken care of everything you possibly can. Valeska, is there anything else that you can think of that would be important for our listeners to learn today before we wrap it up? Any other tips that you would have for them that would be important for takeaways?
I can't think of any offhand. No, let's start early.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so important to think of these, or how important it is to make sure that you've got everything taken care of and that you've done your due diligence and making sure that you have plans in place if something happens, because none of us ever have that crystal ball. We don't know what tomorrow brings, but if you don't have a plan, you're setting your family and yourself up for potential losses in ways, not just emotional, but financial and so forth. So very important. Start early. That's great.
Yeah. That's my best advice.
Start early.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're just about out of time here. Valeska, how can listeners reach out to you? Do you want to, we'll also post this in the show notes, but do you want to give them your email address and your contact information, and we'll make sure that gets listed below. But for any of our listeners, can you share that information?
Yep. So our firm is Hermanson Law PLLC. Our website is hermansonlaw.net. So my email is valeska@hermansonlaw.net. And that is actually the easiest way to get a hold of me. Our phone number is 218-422-4908. But email is actually the easiest way to reach me. So,
okay, very good. We'll make sure that all gets linked in the show notes below, so our listeners can reach out to you. And I hope today's episode with Attorney Valeska Hermanson helped shed some light on what's possible when families plan ahead before they're in panic mode. Don't wait, as that's Valeska's most important piece of advice. And even though Medicaid planning can feel so complicated, but that right guidance and working with a seasoned professional, it's simply just a way to be able to help your family and protect what you've worked so hard to build. So if you've missed part 1 of this conversation, go back and give it a listen. It's full of those great foundational insights to start building on before you get to the application side. And as Valeska stated, she gave all of her contact information. You can reach out to her there. And don't forget to visit pathfinderlegacy.com for our latest planning tools, worksheets. And as always, at the end of the day, it's not just about preserving wealth, it's about preserving your family's way of life. Thank you for joining me on the Pathfinder Legacy podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with a friend or a business farm family. And if you're ready to start the conversation, let's talk. Book a 30-minute discovery call. You can connect with me at pathfinderlegacy.com. Until next time, I'll see you between the ditches.
Thanks for listening to the Pathfinder Legacy podcast, where your future is our focus. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and visit us at pathfinderlegacy.com to start building your transition plan today.